Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Now today I'm going to be talking about how conditional acceptance does not work when it comes to anxiety and OCD recovery. Now, put it this way, if I hadn't adopted unconditional acceptance, I would not have been able to recover from OCD. Briefly, I'm going to go into this video of what I mean. I'm going to delve into more detail of the difference between conditional and unconditional acceptance. But just to start off, briefly, conditional acceptance is when we accept ourselves only if we do well, only if we act competently, only if we achieve this, only if we are successful, and so on. Unconditional acceptance is even when. So even when we may have acted badly or wrongly in the past, even when we may have acted immorally in the past, even when we do not achieve X, Y, or Z, even when we are not successful, even when we are rejected, disapproved of, not liked, not respected. Okay? Now, because with conditional acceptance, we accept ourselves only if. Now, if we're saying that, so if you're saying, I only accept myself as a human, as an individual, if I always perform well, if I am approved of, if I am not rejected, if I am loved, if I am respected. Okay? Well, what OCD will do, it will zone in on that and it will doubt everything, meaning that it will doubt that you may be rejected. Hence why it relates to the boo-related themes and all the guilt-related themes that, oh my God, if only they knew this thought, if only they knew about this real event, false memory in the past, then then this person wouldn't like me. They'd reject me. They'd disapprove of me. I'd be hated by society. I'd be constantly known as someone who has done a terrible thing in the past. That means I can never ever accept myself or be accepted. Okay, so when we chase after conditional acceptance, it's a never-ending chase. It's a constant chase for approval, for being liked. But that can change so often. Even if you were liked at one point in time, and let's say 2 years' time, you're then not liked or irrelevant, not really heard of. Okay, so it just becomes a never-ending chase. Rather than focus on things that you enjoy, things that you want to do, things that could lead to happiness, things, setting goals and trying to achieve them. Rather than doing that, people just chase approval, being loved, being liked, like status seeking. So people only see you as this superhuman, as this godlike figure. Okay, the example is when someone has lots of money and they constantly boast about how much money they have, or they might drive a really fancy car. Nothing wrong with driving a nice car, but you often ask these people, and it's for what other people think of them. It's for driving this lovely car around and looking around and thinking, getting approval from others, just so people can say, oh, what a lovely car, or that guy must be rich, or that guy must be successful. So it's that constant chase for approval. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not saying approval is bad, because approval is nice. It's a nice feeling, and you can aim to be approved, of course, right? But the issue is when we just solely need approval, when our life depends and our acceptance depends on approval, it becomes a slippery slope. And this is why we start to spiral, because any slight doubt that you won't be approved or rejected or hated, then OCD is going to go after that because, oh my God, I cannot accept myself if that was the case. So to get under these taboo-related themes such as POCD, harm OCD, cheating OCD, any theme where it feels like your life is written off, it feels like you're evil, feels like you won't ever be accepted by anyone, or it feels like life isn't worth living because of this thing in the past or because of these thoughts, right? That's how it's going to feel. With unconditional acceptance, it's no matter what, hence the word unconditional, no conditions attached. So even if you've done a bad act in the past, that's not saying you agree with the act, but it's accepting yourself whilst disagreeing with the act in the past, or in the future, or in the now. This is so important for OCD recovery because OCD will always scan the past. I mean, I'm someone who suffered with real event false memory OCD, chronic guilt. So from the minute I woke up in the morning, it was boom, chronic guilt. From the minute I went to bed, it was boom, chronic guilt, right? Scanning the past, always finding something to firmly grip to, meaning that your life is ruined, meaning that the day's ruined, meaning whatever you're looking forward to is ruined. You can't enjoy a moment, that any peace doesn't belong to you. You can't have peace. You should feel chronic guilt forever because of this thing in the past. Okay? Now that's what OCD is going to do. So with unconditional acceptance, it gets under that. Because guilt is perpetuated and applied when we cannot accept ourselves, if this thing was true. So OCD goes after when we can't accept this unforgivable thing, this step too far, okay? That's what it goes after. So with unconditional acceptance, it's even if I did this thing that is unacceptable, even if I did this unforgivable act, even if I ended up in jail, even if I died, got cancer, it's accepting yourself, even if. This is so important, and this is going to take a little while to apply, okay? It doesn't just happen overnight, because people say to me in one-to-one calls, Sam, I see the logic, I see the rationale behind what you're saying, but I would never be able to apply that. And I ask them why. And they say, because I'm so used to a conditioned way of thinking. I'm so used to writing myself off and calling myself a bad, terrible, evil monster because of this thing. Well, there's no wonder OCD is scanning, looking in the past for something that's not going to let you off the hook. There's no wonder, okay? I cannot stress and highlight the importance of adopting unconditional acceptance, bit by bit. Don't come off this video and go, right, thanks Sam, I now unconditionally accept myself. It's not that simple. It's perspective shifts over time. It's light bulb moments going, even if that happened, even if my worst case scenario is true, I could accept myself as a fallible human who's capable of doing good, bad, neutral acts. Remember, don't confuse acceptance with agreement. You can strongly disagree and hate an act. You can label an act horrendous, right? You can do. However, if you then label yourself as evil, a monster, no good, undeserving of anything, then there's no wonder the chronic guilt is through the roof and ramps up. Okay? I hope you can see the logic. So you're not trying to justify something. You're not trying to support an act that you see as bad. You're not trying to say, yes, that's good. You're not saying that. That's where people get confused, and that's where people get stuck. You're saying, okay, that act is bad, and even if you committed that act, you can accept yourself as a human who's capable of doing that, whilst strongly disagreeing with that. Okay? So it's separating the act from the individual, because people say, because I did this act, that means I'm a total evil person, right? But that makes no sense, because if you were a totally evil person, that means you could only ever in your lifetime do totally evil acts. Well, that's not the case, and that can be disproven very, very quickly. Even someone in jail, for example, that you see has done a really bad thing, you could say an unforgivable act, before that act, they might have been doing really good things, or they might have done a neutral act, or they might have done, they might have cared for their elder family or parent, or they might have gave money to charity or to a homeless person, or little things like that. So if you're saying because of this one thing, and don't get me wrong, I view it as, let's say someone in jail who's committed various amount of crimes, several crimes. That human would have a genetic tendency to perform badly in society, right? Hence why they're in jail, hence why they're facing the consequence, okay? But if you're labeling this individual as totally evil, and with that kind of thinking, OCD is going to go after you and say, well, you're totally evil because of this one thing, or because of this thought, or because this thing might happen, then it doesn't let you off the hook, okay? So the concept of good and bad would mean that a good person can only do good things and a bad person can only do bad things, and a neutral person can only do neutral things. Well, that is a load of rubbish, because what you see as bad or good, for example, another group of society could see that as the other way around. If you ask a tribe in Africa, for example, what something good would be in the UK or the US, they might see that as bad in their society or in their culture. Okay, so there's little realizations like that. Now, the main message of this video is not coming off this video and saying, right, thanks Sam, that means I'm going to try and see every bad act as good. No, that is the wrong path. I spent down that path, ages down that path, and getting nowhere, feeling even worse, going, how can I try and justify this evil, horrendous act? That is the wrong path. What you are trying to do is accept yourself as a fallible human that can easily mess up, that can easily do bad, that can easily do mistakes, as someone capable of doing a bad act, but never writing yourself off as bad and totally evil. That is where chronic guilt has such a big part in people's journeys. Now, I cannot highlight this enough. I'm not just saying this for the sake of it. I'm talking about my own personal journey. I was stuck with chronic guilt for years. 10 years, 5 years, there's no exact time frame, but severe chronic guilt, the debilitating, the unable to function, the couldn't look at anyone in the eye, the confidence, my confidence was at an all-time low. Just all parts of my life was just taken over by this guilt, because even if you said, Sam, you've won £1 million, or Sam, your football team has just won, you've just been promoted, and I'd be like, oh, it doesn't really matter, this thing in the past. Oh, it doesn't really matter, what's the point? What's the point even getting up out of bed? This thing in the past, I feel too guilty to even think about that. And I used to speak like that. How I would speak then, I was very miserable, very sort of, low tone, very sort of quiet. Going, yeah, what's the point? I'm undeserving of anything. I'll never ever be forgived. And just thinking that all the time, just beating myself up over the head. So compassion is so important. Okay, even with an act that you see as really bad, try and have compassion for someone who's committed that act, because there's so many different factors as to why someone does such a thing. Even if you did an horrendous act, you watching this video, even if you've done a really bad act, you can see there's genetic factors at play, environment, upbringing, different experiences, how the brain's wired, how the brain's developed. And I'm going to say it again, you're not trying to justify an act in the past. You're not trying to say that act was good or that act was neutral. You can strongly still see an act as bad with unconditional acceptance, but you accept the human, you accept the other individual, you accept life as unconditionally. You don't attach one thing to the individual. Okay, this is very important. Now, if you read chapter 4 in The Myth of Self-Esteem, that book will really break it down. Albert Ellis really breaks it down and goes into more detail with that. So I just want to talk about some examples of how conditional acceptance cannot work in life. Let me just sip this cup of tea. So I was speaking to someone the other day, completely non-OCD related, and we got onto the subject of cosmetic surgery. Now, there's nothing inherently good or bad with cosmetic surgery. Okay, I understand reasons why people may go down that route. I understand why people don't. I understand all different perspectives on it. I get that, right? I completely appreciate that. However, with conditional acceptance, when you are having things like that done, when you're constantly trying to change bits of your body parts, trying to maybe change your nose slightly, maybe your teeth, maybe your hair, maybe your eyes, maybe your ears placement, all different body parts, okay? What I often ask people is that from a stance where you cannot accept yourself even with how you look currently, even with your current appearance? Usually the answer is, it makes me feel good, okay? But that is because you are chasing the constant approval and love from others, right? You're saying that I need to move my nose by 1 millimeter. I need to get my teeth straightened and whitened to make sure they are perfect, because you need others to approve of you. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying these things are inherently bad, okay? It's the reasoning why people do these things, okay? Ask yourself, am I doing it solely to be approved and loved and liked and people see me as attracted by other people? Or am I doing it because I genuinely want that change of my body? Quite often, and people aren't going to want to hear this, but quite often it's the former. It's the, yes, I need that approval. I need to be loved. I need to be seen as hot. I need to be seen as good looking, attractive. Okay, but that is the opposite of unconditional acceptance, because unconditional acceptance is accepting yourself even with ugly traits, even with unattractive personality or unattractive traits. It's all subjective anyway, because what I might find attractive, Nick might find not attractive, right? And vice versa. So it's all different beliefs and different perspectives on things. Okay, we've got to be really honest with ourselves when we ask ourselves, is it conditional acceptance? Is it unconditional acceptance? Well, ask yourself this: am I doing it from a stance of I need them to reject me? I need them to approve me. Can I accept myself? Am I saying, well, I can only accept myself if my nose is in this position, if I perform well, if I look this well, if I have this many followers on Instagram, if I earn this amount of money, if I have this amount of savings, if I have this car, if I have this many bedrooms in my house, I can go on all night about these different conditional ways of looking at ourselves, okay? But conditional self-acceptance, this is what I think personally is the biggest drawback of people's emotional health. Now, this is coming from someone who used to strongly and rigidly believe, and it was just a way of thinking, conditional acceptance. Because I constantly said I could only accept myself if this act hadn't happened, if these thoughts didn't happen, if I earn X amount of money, if I am loved by this person, if my friends approve of me, if I am this good at football, if I have this car. Now, I used to think like that, but then I spent all day feeling anxious, feeling guilty, because especially on the acts in the past and any thought that you get, because OCD will chuck in any thought that you don't want at an unwanted time. And then with the conditional acceptance that I can only accept myself if I'm constantly moral, if I'm never performing bad or do something wrong, then OCD is going to go after that, like waving a red flag to a bull, okay? So these are all points why unconditional acceptance is so important. Another example that we use, or that I use, is the financial field, okay? Of course, you set goals to earn lots of money. There's many advantages and positives of earning lots of money. Of course there is, okay? But why do we think that people who have lots of money may even end their life, may be very unhappy? Well, let me tell you why. That reasoning will be because they only view themselves as good or as acceptable or as worth living or as a good person, or you're only competent if you're in this amount of money. This is kind of the beliefs they'll be telling themselves. But with that kind of thinking, can you see the constant chase? And then you get a greediness trait where, you constantly want more and more and more, because you can only accept yourself if you get more and more and more. So let's say you've got £1 million and then you say, well, that's not enough now. I can accept myself, or I can only live life if I earn £2 million, for example. And then down the chase you go. Now, remember, I'm not saying these goals are bad. Financial goals are great. I set financial goals. But the difference is it's from an unconditional acceptance point, where even if I didn't achieve these goals, then I could accept myself as an individual, as a human, right? That's not saying I don't want to achieve the goal. Of course I want to achieve the goal, be very passionate about achieving goals. Hence why I go on missions with like OCD as well, raising awareness and helping other people. But it's not from a conditional self-esteem standpoint. It is from unconditional acceptance that even if I made a mistake, even if I said the wrong thing, even if I gave the wrong advice, even if I lost X amount of money, even if I did a really bad act, even if I spent the rest of my life in jail, even if my fiance left me, even if I died, right? I could accept that and myself. This is so important, okay? I see it in sport a lot. I love my sport. If you know me, you know I love my sport. And I'm around competitive sport all the time. Okay, this is this really highlights conditional acceptance. Let me explain. Because people rate themselves, people label themselves as good as bad, or as good and bad, based on their footballing ability, based on their cricketing ability, how good they are at darts, how much money they earn from their sport, how much prize money. Now, yet again, I'm going to say that if you're a footballer, for example, It is great that you're aiming to be successful. It is great that you're aiming to achieve to the highest level you possibly can. That is good. However, where people go wrong is that they rate themselves based on their footballing ability. So they're saying, because I didn't get that transfer, because I didn't get that move, because I didn't earn this amount of money, that means I'm no good and never will be that good. All right, so I'm never ever taken away the drive and striving to achieve goals. Never taken that away, because I love that as a key part of life, very important part of life. But I separate the trying to achieve the goal with rating the person, because when you start rating yourself and other people and life, you go into emotional turmoil. Because let's be real, things in life aren't going to go your way. You're going to face problems. You're not going to achieve this amount of money. You're not going to achieve this goal all the time. You're not going to always be successful. You might be disliked. You might be hated. You might be rejected by many people. Okay, this is all walks of life. So if you're holding the belief that I must be accepted by everyone, that in order to accept myself, I must achieve this, I must do this, I must be competent, I must earn this amount of money, I must be successful, then that is when the feelings, the unhealthy, negative emotions like guilt, rage, self-pity, despair, anxiety, panic, anger, severe shame and guilt, that is when those feelings will come into play. Okay? I'm going to say it again. Unconditional acceptance is I'd say it was the biggest layer for my recovery journey. All right, this is coming from someone who suffered with all the taboo-related guilt themes, the real events, the false memories, any theme where your life's over, where it feels like, what's the point? No, you might as well end your life because that's just too much. You just wouldn't be able to accept that as an individual. But all you see, it's a barrier of fear, overcoming that barrier, and you'll see that it's the conditional acceptance holding you back. Fear is an illusion. When you start seeing that, and once you start breaking through that with unconditional acceptance, then there is the word unconditional. It does exactly what it says. Unconditional, no matter what. Okay? Acceptance isn't agreement. You are not coming from a standpoint where you're trying to agree with everything. Good luck with that, because that is not the right path. The right path is accepting you, your personhood, your identity, your value, your you-ness, regardless of the act committed, regardless of the thought at this time, regardless of whether you're successful, regardless of your financial position, regardless if you have friends, regardless if your family approve of you, okay? These are vital points for OCD and anxiety recovery. If you're struggling to apply it, get it down on paper. If you're still struggling, and it's also good to have the guidance from us and the team. So please email phil@ocdrecovery.com. I think there'll be a link in the description of this video, a WhatsApp link where you can message Phil, and then we'll get you booked in for a one-to-one session, and we can go through these steps with you of gradually applying unconditional acceptance. Okay, because I know how it feels. I've been in your shoes where it feels like completely hopeless, feels like there's no way out at all, feels like I'm going to be stuck forever. This is where unconditional acceptance plays such a big part. If you have liked this video, please leave a like, and we'll speak again. Bye bye.